Hey everybody, this is Zachary Jeans. Let's keep walking through the Bible. So today is day 358. That's right, we're on episode 358, and we are in the book of Exodus. We're working our way through the book of Exodus, and now we are going to enter a section of laws. Roughly 3 chapters. It's not purely all do this, don't do that. There is some commentary in there. We're going to read it. Again, as we enter into some of these more lengthy lists that would include genealogies, although this doesn't include a genealogy, but these kinds of writings, and because we aren't doing a verse-by-verse study, I won't be going through necessarily every line. However, we will acknowledge the content in the chapter. I may pull out a verse to talk about. So just give you a heads up. First of all, one thing you can do is stop this recording and take a minute. Go read the chapters. I believe my intention is to get through chapter 21, chapter 22, and chapter 23. Okay? So if you want to go refresh your memory about what these chapters are covering, go do so. Go take a minute, just read through it, or you can put it on an audiobook. If you go to esv.org and download the Bible app there onto your phone or your computer, there is an audio button. And if you click that audio button, there is an actual author, a voice actor, that will read the Bible to you. It's not a computer-generated voice, it's a real person. So you could listen to this passage. So again, take a minute, get familiar with the text, come on back. So if you are back and you are ready to roll with me, or you don't need to read the text, let's stop, let's pray. Lord, I love you. God, you never cease to amaze me, and I love, God, your word and how it opens up, even hundreds, and in this case, thousands of years later. Lord, please, God, make yourself known. Please, God, glorify yourself. Please make yourself clear and apparent to us. God, please show us what you want to see, what we need to see. Help us see, God, things in our lives that are applicable. Help us see what's not applicable here, God. I know that these laws were written for them in this time, and yet there's truth in them that continues on to this day. So God, I just lay this at your feet and just ask for your blessing, Jesus. It's in your name we pray. Amen. All right. Got my Dodgers hat on. I'm not a huge baseball fan. I've been casually following the Dodgers now for, I don't know, probably about eight years. I mean, I've been aware of them for a long time, obviously. I follow baseball a little bit. I enjoy it. It's good background. I enjoy watching a game occasionally. I got this hat when I went to spring training for the first time ever last year. Went with my mom. It was great. We had really great seats, paid the money. I don't go to a lot of games, and it's just fantastic. I don't know if I'm getting down there this year, but I picked up this hat there and I love it. Okay, so if you can, please turn to chapter 21 in Exodus, and let's get going. Get a little more light over here. All right. Now these are the rules that you shall set before them. When you buy a Hebrew slave, now this word slave can be translated slave, servant, bondservant, oftentimes referred to bondservant in the New Testament. There's a note here that I think is fair. So the term servant or slave, the Hebrew term ebed, designates a range of social and economic roles. So there was a group of people who didn't own stuff, right? Own tents and camels and donkeys and in this case, other labor. They worked for those who did. And not a lot's changed in some respects, right? The term slave is hard to hear, and that's largely due, obviously, to the history in the United States that we've had with slavery. And if you're from another country, you know that your country has experienced that in different formats over the centuries. And it's just horrific, right? The enslavement of people and the cruel, harsh treatment of people, them being forced to work for your gain if you were an owner. So that is horrible. This is describing something that's going on hundreds, thousands of years ago, and it was the economic relationship of those who worked for those who had, and those who had needed those who could work. So yeah, it's still pretty ugly, but it was more of like it was more of an economic system and how people got jobs. It's not like you just go down in the employment office or a job center and go, hey, I've got some skills, I don't have skills, I need a job. And they're like, hey, let's talk to people, and you can try this out, you can go work at a factory, you can go work at fast food, whatever. It wasn't like that. It was like, if you want to live, you can't just go roaming around in the countryside. You actually need something to do, and something to do with someone. And oftentimes you're born into a family and you had a life. Now, there is some mobility that will be described here in this chapter. And we're going to get into that. So this is in the case of a Hebrew, that is a Jewish person, born into service in a family, or acquired and put into service. Okay? So when you buy a Hebrew slave or servant, he shall serve 6 years, and in the 7th he shall go out free. Okay? Now mind this number, 7 years. Okay? If he comes in single, he shall go out single. If he comes in married, then his wife shall go out with him. So anything that you had gained during your time, in terms of marriage, relationship, that's not yours to take with you. But if you came in married and you earn your right to leave after 7 years, or in the 7th year, then you can also go out with your wife. If his master gives him a wife, and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out alone. But if the slave or servant plainly says, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out free, then his master shall bring him to God, and he shall bring him to the door or the doorpost, and his master shall bore his ear with an awl, and he shall be his slave or servant forever. This is the concept of the bond servant. Okay? So this is when somebody who has served the duration, the term, their indenturedness to that family, then that person has a right to then say, you know what? Though I can leave, I want to stay. Out of love, I want to stay. And this concept of that we are servants of either God or Satan comes up in Romans. It comes up in many places in the New Testament. Our sense of freedom is a sense of who we can serve. And the Bible says you either serve the Lord or you don't serve the Lord. You're serving the evil one. And you're like, I don't know the Lord. I don't serve the Lord. I'm definitely not serving Satan. And I would say, well, the Bible is pretty clear that Satan works in mysterious ways. The Lord works in mysterious ways. The enemy works in mysterious ways. And he is deceptive, and you may not know how and where and why you are serving, in fact, the enemy. But the Bible says it's either or. And that's pretty creepy when you start thinking about it. It means the things that you think are good, or the ways and patterns of life that you thought were, nascent, not necessarily meaning anything, sort of out in the gray area. Either you are attending to the Lord or you're attending to the enemy in those things. So, in a grand cosmic scheme, in the scales of justice, the Lord sees it very clearly and tells us it works this way. And as a bondservant, this image here will be carried forward all the way into the era of the church, in the time in which you can apply yourself out of love, coming out of a period of slavery to the enemy. You can become a bondservant to the Lord. Okay. So when a man sells his daughter as a slave, she shall not go out as the male slaves do. And you're like, that's not fair. Well, it's actually, believe it or not, it's like a protection. I know it's an ugly protection here. It sounds that way. There wasn't a lot of opportunity for women to work back in the day outside of the construct of a family, of serving a family. They're just, again, there's not like you can just go out and get a job at the grocery store. It just wasn't an option. If she does not please her master, who has designated her for himself, then he shall let her be redeemed. He shall have no right to sell her to a foreign people, since he has broken faith with her. If he designates her for his son, he shall deal with her as with a daughter. So there is no like keeping around somebody in some sort of secondary class and marrying into the family. You are elevated into the authority role, into the position within the family in terms of the manager class of people once you marry in. So you can't keep some sort of like, maybe the son finds her attractive and he's like, I just want her for a physical relationship. Yeah, marry me to her so I do that and not get stink eye from the community and from the law. But then treat her as a servant. No, there's none of that. It's like you are elevated. And so this is also kind of a amazing, liberating thing in society back then, that you could be elevated from this position into a authority role in the family. If he takes another wife to himself, he shall not diminish her food, her clothing, or her material rights. And if he does not do these three things for her, she shall go out for nothing without payment or money. And so, if in the case of being put to the side because he has another interest, the law, God's law, is going to hold him accountable, and she is going to be afforded a compensatory life to that which she had become accustomed. Some of our divorce laws actually go back to this, right? And also, should she be treated so, she has also the ability to be set free into public life. Now, again, it might be hard, but with some of these resources that she had gained from that marriage, it's entirely possible she might find herself in another marriage or in some other situation that is beneficial to her. Whoever strikes a man so that he dies shall be put to death. But if he did not lie in wait for him, but God let him fall into his hand, then I will appoint for you a place to which he may flee. And they are going to do this. You're going to see those cities of refuge. But if a man willfully attacks another to kill him by cunning, you shall take him from my altar that he may die. Accidental death, right? And intentional murder, death. Two differences. All death by the hand of a person isn't the same. Was it by an accident? Was this an act of God? Was it just happenstance, circumstance? Did it happen? Well, then to protect the person who committed that death, caused that death, we're going to allow for a safe place for them to go live so that that family, the people associated with that person who died, won't hunt them down and kill them. They'll have a city or a place of refuge. We'll look at those later. But for those that intentionally did it with cunning, they intended, well, the judgment's just, right? Whoever strikes his father or mother shall be put to death. Sounds harsh, but you start to wonder like how society would be if these laws were understood by everyone. You think of, well, that's really harsh. Think about the moment of anger or passion and somebody raising their hand against a parent, and how could you do that? And why would God say they need to die? And it's because a lot of reasons. It has a lot to do with the way God set up authority in the world and how it represents him, and honoring God, and the relationship of parent to child. It also it shows the structure by which people have peace and harmony, that we don't allow violence against the authority of our family structure. And when you have that warning, like, hey, you cannot do this, and if you do, you're done. Well, think about that. Think about all the YouTube videos you can watch, the body police cams being called in on domestic violence. That goes away, right? They're showing up, take them away, and in general, the population goes, yeah. Everyone goes, you can't do that. And everyone's taught that. Whoever steals a man and sells him, and anyone found in possession of him shall be put to death. Okay? When you're taking somebody's, in modern terms, poaching, the concept of one company offering another company's employee a contract without the knowledge or negotiation of that talent is often referred to as poaching. I think that this is freedom of movement in our current world, and that it should be allowed. But you can also see why poaching laws or poaching agreements have come to be. It's for this very reason. That it's the concept that you are stealing something which that company or family in this case has sought to acquire, provide for, and is a part of its infrastructure. And you're stealing that, and that is, in this case, punished by death. So how often do you think people would risk doing that, especially in a smaller community, like where you just can't disappear? Probably not that often. When men quarrel and one strikes another with a stone or with his fist, and the man does not die, but takes to his bed, then if the man rises again and walks outdoors with his staff, he who struck him shall be clear. Only he shall pay for the loss of his time, and shall have him thoroughly healed. Hey, this is why that whole fist fights and buy him a beer later, sorting things out. That's where that culture comes from, right? It comes from this position of, anger and passion rises in a moment and fights happen. But, let's not pull guns or knives or bang people's heads against concrete, but let's sort it out, as wrong as it is, and let's make restitution. Let's take care of the person, let's get them right, and let's make amends. Okay? When men strive together and hit a pregnant woman so that her children come out, but there is no harm, the one who hit her shall surely be fined, as the woman's husband shall impose on him, and he shall pay as judge determined. But if there is harm, then you shall pay life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. Okay? This applies to unborn children. And this is kind of like where a lot of the heart behind why the Christian culture, we believe that abortion is so serious. We don't believe that there is some gelatinous mass of cells one day, and then should that gelatinous mass of cells somehow exit the body of the woman, all of a sudden, oh, whoa, look at that, there's a baby. That's a human being. Do you see how absurd it sounds? But when when a person is trying to justify not having to have the responsibility and care for that person, they have to turn it into a non-person, and they have to turn it into a situation where getting rid of that non-person has no penalty. So without getting into a huge conversation around abortion, I just want to say this is kind of where that sentiment comes from. Like, if there's an argument, in this case, it's just like people, fighting and arguing and bumping into a very obviously heavily pregnant woman, and a child or two comes out, like as in it induces labor, and the child lives, well, then her needs going to be cared for. There's going to be restitution. But if she and or her child is born dead or harmed, then there's going to be a payment and harm. And I just wonder, I know the experience of those who live through times where abortion is illegal and the harms that are occurred when somebody has to seek it out and society says no, and they need to do it for some medical reason or whatever. Of course, all these horror stories are told. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about what is the principle behind getting rid of a life and no consequences of that. A you or a me would fully form and live a full life had somebody not decided that our life didn't matter. And so the Bible would imply that your life is as forfeit, right? That's hard to hear, but I think that that's the point. That little life matters. That little person is a big person yet to be realized. And their life is not worth less than your life, let alone worth nothing. Does that make sense? All right. So, when a man strikes the eye of his slave, male or female, and destroys it, he shall let the slave go free because of the eye. And if he knocks out the tooth of his slave, male or female, he shall let the slave go free because of his tooth. Violence against servants or slaves in this translation is not acceptable. I think that is probably lost on most people as they read the Bible, this Old Testament. This was supposed to be a mindful, caring, structured environment, and you just couldn't beat on people. And if you did so, you gave up your right to have their employment. When an ox gores a man or a woman to death, the ox shall be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten. But the owner of the ox shall not be liable. But if the ox has been accustomed to gore in the past, and its owner has been warned, but has not kept it in, and it kills a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and its owner shall also be put to death. Whoa. If you know that something you put out there, in this case an ox, you put some animal out there basically, or some situation, this is where this principle would come from. If you know this thing is dangerous and you put it out there in public, you're as liable. You're just as liable as the thing that committed the act of violence. Okay? So if you didn't know, then hey, it's okay. Don't do it again, right? If ransom is imposed on him, then he shall give for the redemption of his life whatever is imposed on him. If it gores a man's son or daughter, he shall be dealt with accordingly to the same rule. If the ox gores a slave, male or female, the owner shall give to their master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned. And You go, well, that doesn't make sense. Like, why are we paying just silver? Well, again, it goes to do with the property, and this is kind of the ugly side of this societal structure. And I think it's always important to remind everyone, this wasn't the only place that this societal structure existed in the old world, okay? It was pervasive across many cultures. When a man opens a pit, or when a man digs a pit and does not cover it, and an ox or donkey falls into it, the owner of the pit shall make restoration. He shall give money to its owner, and the dead beast shall be his. But when one man's ox butts another's so that it dies, they shall sell the live ox and share its price. And the dead beast also they shall share. Or if it is known that the ox has been accustomed to gore in the past, and its owner has not kept it in, he shall repay ox for ox, the dead beast shall be his. You got to sort it out, split it up, make it right. But if you know that your beast going out has already done wrong before, well, you kind of forfeit, right? If a man steals an ox, chapter 22, verse 1, an ox or a sheep and kills it or sells it, he shall repay 5 oxen for an ox and 4 sheep for a sheep. If a thief is found breaking in and is struck so that he dies, there shall be no blood guilt for him. But the sun has risen on him, there shall be blood guilt for him. He shall surely pay if he has nothing. Then he shall be sold for his theft. If the stolen beast is found alive in his possession, whether it is an ox or donkey or a sheep, he shall pay double. So, look, this comes down to, do you have the right to defend your home from a thief? And our right to defend our homes is inherent in our justice code in the United States. It has been very much eaten away at in different states. But there are stand your ground laws that are found basically in this little passage here. This is where that concept comes from in our modern law. You have the right to defend yourself. You have the right, even unto death of the other, to the thief, to defend yourself. But again, you got to be careful, because also the concept of murder is there, in that you can't say entrap someone into stealing something and then commit the act of murder. That would be entrapment. That would be you were aware of the person coming in. In fact, in this scenario I laid out, you lured them in and then you killed them. And to this end, many layers of our society have to deal with this concept. Not to mention law enforcement, right? So it's not fair in any sense for a law enforcement to entrap people and then to lure them in and to foment the exercise of a crime and then go, gotcha. I think honestly that's wrong. There's a difference between simply putting bait out, right? And then being the one who foments the whole crime and then invites others into it. See what I mean? Like, and that is a very tough line for law enforcement and for nonprofit groups who are attempting to stop crimes, especially crimes against children, human trafficking. They have to be careful not to commit the crime itself, to entrap the person and then say, gotcha. That said, I think it's wrong to not go after those people who are committing those crimes. So you got to put the bait out there. But this is where that whole stand your ground, the castle laws, the idea that your home, you have the right to defend your home, and even in up to the taking of life. If a man causes a field or vineyard to be grazed over, or lets his beast loose and it feeds in another man's field, he shall make restitution from the best of his own field and in his own vineyard. If fire breaks out and catches in thorns so that its stacked grain or the standing grain of the field is consumed, he who started the fire shall make full restitution. You know, I think of those kids who were out in the forest joking around, hiking down the trail out here in the gorge. This is a few years ago. And the kid, as far as we allegedly understand the story, he's a teenager, he's with some friends, and they're just having a good time, and it's dry and it's hot and it's a beautiful day. And one of them has like a firework, and he lights it and throws it down into the stream, right? Thinking it'll go in the water, it'll make a lot of smoke and, you know, underneath the water and whatever, but it catches fire. And it led to one of the biggest fires that this whole area has seen in a long time, right? It's the Eagle Creek fire. And just burned up so much forest. And people are like wanting blood for this. They wanted restitution from this kid. And it's like, this kid could never in an entire lifetime, even if he was like a multi-millionaire successful person, which of course he's not going to be because of this error in life that he's already made, he's not going to be able to repay for the destruction of those woods just in a careless act, right? But the concept of going out into somebody's farm field and setting it ablaze, lighting somebody's crop on fire, blowing up somebody's chicken farm. You see a lot of that stuff going on right now. And I got to tell you, I think that people have been investigating that stuff. And I'll tell you why, because you saw waves of it. For never did we ever see meat factories going up in smoke, and we didn't see like farms all of a sudden catching fire, and, you know, big giant granaries and processing plants. But boy, didn't we see a lot of that over the last couple of years. And it wasn't happening consistently, right? It would just happen in like a big batch of them. Train derailments, things like that. And you just got to go, well, look, clearly somebody is behind that. I mean, it's not accidental. None of the statistical data would suggest that it was accidental. And so I see it tamped down in the news stories. So clearly those things are being investigated, and there will be restoration, right? There will be prosecution. And here we are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and these concepts were being established, right, in the law. And our laws in the United States, our Constitution, is largely built on these principles. So, if a man gives to his neighbor money or goods to keep safe, and it is stolen from the man's house, then if the thief is found, he shall pay double. If the thief is not found, the owner of the house shall come near to God to show whether or not he has put his hand to his neighbor's property. For every breach of trust, whether it's an ox or a donkey or a sheep or a cloak or any kind of lost thing, of which one says, this is it. The case of both parties shall come before God. The one whom God condemns shall pay double to his neighbor. If a man gives to his neighbor a donkey or an ox or a sheep or beast to keep safe, and it dies or is injured or is driven away without anyone seeing it, an oath by the Lord shall be between them both to see whether or not he has put his hand to his neighbor's property. The owner shall accept the oath, and he shall not make restitution. But if it is stolen from him, he shall make restitution to his owner. If it is torn by beasts, let him bring it as evidence. He shall not make restitution for what has been torn. So this is whole thing where God gets involved. You know, I swear on the Bible, I make an oath before the Lord, that sort of thing. That is where that comes from. This idea that, like, before God, I am testifying. God is my witness, right? That's where this comes from. If a man borrows anything of his neighbor and it's injured or dies, the owner not being with it, he shall make full restitution. If the owner was with it, he shall not make restitution. If it was hired, it came for its hiring fee. So if you're borrowing an ox, or, you know, you have like some sort of animal and you're not there and the thing gets harmed, well, guess what? The person who borrowed it, they're going to have to pay up. But if you're present and you're kind of there with the person, not so much. Okay. If a man seduces a virgin who is not betrothed, that's engaged, right? In the classic Jewish sense, in the betrothed, that is set to be married, and it usually lasted months, if not a year, a period of time that you were kind of like married but not together and not have sex, not betrothed, and lies with her, he shall give the bride price for her and make her his wife. You got to honor her. If her father utterly refuses to give her to him, he shall pay money equal to the bride price for virgins. It's up to dad whether or not you get to marry the gal in this society. Sounds harsh. Couples don't like that. Our society doesn't get married anymore anyway. Not like we used to, right? So in this case, though, the dad, the head of the household, is looking out for the daughter and going, you know what? Dude, I don't trust you, right? This is where the dad has the guy come in and sit down, and he's got the TV on, and he's got a shotgun over his lap, this old image that we have from our society, and has this stern talking to the young fellow, you know, you treat my daughter right, that sort of thing. And he reads the guy and sees whether or not he trusts him or not. If he trusts him, then he gets to continue to be with his daughter and get married. If not, dude, you ain't coming in. You ain't allowed in the house. So there's very much about, in modern society, how we go and ask for the dad's permission to marry the daughter. I did that with my wife. I didn't know Heather's dad that well at all. He was around camp and stuff. He lived in the area, and he'd come out and do some work, help out. Heather worked full time there. I was volunteering. And when I went to ask Heather to marry me, before I did so, I went and I talked to her dad, and we hung out. We spent some time at his apartment. We prayed. I got down on my knees at his place, and I just prayed to the Lord, and he prayed, and he had peace, and he gave me his blessing. Now, technically in our society, do you need that in order to get married? No, you don't. But man, there's just something here, right, about honoring, even in a family where dad isn't necessarily a good guy, having that conversation. I think that there's a blessing in it from this, right? You shall not permit a sorceress to live. Oh, that's hardcore, right? Death to witches. So that's where our society in America went really sideways. The Salem witch trials and all kinds of stuff. The flip side of that is it assumed, well, one of the assumptions is that they weren't really witches, and that it was an assault on feminism. It also assumes that witchcraft isn't real, or if anything, it's just merely an honoring of different seasons and celestial patterns, and a different religion where you honor spirits of things that aren't, again, society says isn't really real, but hey, they're allowed to pretend all they want. And by the way, they also think that Christians are pretending too, because none of this is real. So those are the base assumptions in a secular society about witches, about sorcery, about even mainline religion, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism. It's all very nice. Don't do any harm to anybody. So long as you don't have harmful ideas or thoughts about other people or do harm, you can think whatever it is that you want to think. And so when it comes to the issue of sorcery, people tend to go, okay, go out in the woods and bang your drums and maybe have some weird ritual. I'm not going to get involved. And you see where I'm going with this? Here's the thing. It is real. Now, maybe not all this stuff where, you get some teenage kids playing around with the Ouija board, and that's not a good idea either. But, it's less on the grand scheme of things real than this stuff that they're talking about here. They're talking about real sorcery, real blood magic, which often involves the sacrificing of animals and in some cases, children and people. So this was a high crime. And because of that, because it was an absolute affront, and they believed in the power of not only their God, Jehovah, Yahweh, okay, they also understood that there was a spiritual enemy on this earth, and that people sacrificed and performed dark arts in alignment with that opposition. So in the people of Israel, the Hebrews, they were not allowed to practice this in the camp and in and amongst the people. This was not allowed. Now, would it happen? Yeah, it does. You'll read the history here, and you're going to find out that they did commit quite a bit of it. Whoever lies with an animal shall be put to death. I just read a story of a professor at a school out in Massachusetts, at a university, who was caught on camera with bestiality. And then further evidence has alleged that he has committed many acts. Bestiality is a real thing, and God finds it to be evil. Not only that, but genetics research, where you get into mixing of DNAs between people and animals, no doubt that is going on. Okay, it's not just in the superhero movies, and God would find that evil as well. Whoever sacrifices to any god other than the Lord alone shall be devoted to destruction. You shall not wrong a sojourner or oppress him, for you were sojourners in the land of Egypt. You shall not mistreat any widow or fatherless child. If you do mistreat them and they cry out to me, I will surely hear their cry, and my wrath will burn, and I will kill you with the sword, and your wives shall become widows, and your children fatherless. There's a threat. Don't commit acts of violence, sexual, physical, towards any weaker part of society, men. Don't do it. I'm not talking about you sleeping around. That has its own penalties. I'm talking about you raising your hand in any way, attacking the weak. Children, young women, older women, whatever women. Don't do it. Don't do it. It was true back here. It's true today. Knock it off. God promises he'll avenge them. If you lend money to any of my people with you who is poor, you shall not be like a moneylender to him, and you shall not extract interest from him. If you take your neighbor's cloak in pledge, you shall return it to him before the sun goes down. For that is the only covering, and it is his cloak for his body. And what else shall he sleep? And if he cries to me, I will hear, for I am compassionate. God sounds harsh in this book. God is compassionate. Behind every harsh statement in here is a compassionate God. And that's the lens. That is the lens you have to read the Bible through in this Old Testament. Okay? You shall not revile God, nor curse a ruler of your people. You shall not delay to offer the fullness of your harvest, and from the outflow of your presses, the firstborn of your sons you shall give to me. You shall do the same with your oxen and with your sheep. 7 days it shall be with its mother. On the 8th day you shall give it to me. You shall be consecrated to me. Therefore you shall not eat any flesh that is torn by beasts in the field. You shall throw it to the dogs. First things first, they go to God. Things that are somehow tore up, maybe got rabies or infections, don't eat it, right? No matter how hungry you are. You shall not spread a false report. You shall not join hands with a wicked man to be a malicious witness. You shall not fall in with many to do evil, nor shall you bear witness in a lawsuit, siding with the many, so as to pervert justice. Nor shall you be partial to a poor man in his lawsuit. The law has to be blind, it has to judge everyone equal. Whether you got cash, you got nothing. You can't just mob rule and declare what is right and what is wrong. You have to appeal to the truth and to the law, and you can't take into account where somebody's coming from in society. Everybody has to be treated equally under the law. If you meet your enemy's ox or his donkey going astray, you shall bring it back to him. If you see the donkey of one who hates you lying down under its burden, you shall refrain from leaving him with it. You shall rescue it with him. Just because you're at odds with somebody doesn't mean it's right to do nothing to help somebody, or in this case, an animal, that's bearing its burden and crushed under it. You have to do right when it's right. You shall not pervert the justice due to your poor in his lawsuit. Keep far from a false charge, and do not kill the innocent and righteous, for I will not acquit the wicked. And you shall take no bribe, for a bribe blinds the clear-sighted and subverts the cause of those who are in the right. When you look in today's society, and you look on the news, and you ask yourself, how in the world could that judge or that lawmaker or that official not see clear, obvious, totally in the face of everyone, no one can deny it, illegality? And they choose in that moment to say it was not illegal, or to simply say, I'm not going to prosecute, I'm not going to do anything about this. You can almost be assured that they are being bribed, and or the opposite side or the flip side of a bribe is blackmailed, right? They're being bribed with security of their errors and crimes not being publicized, right? They're taking that bribe. You shall not oppress a sojourner. You know the heart of a sojourner, for you are sojourners in the land of Egypt. So when somebody comes around that's had a hard time and they're in your space and they're fleeing that political oppression, you can't treat them poorly, because guess what? We all came from somewhere. So that's the real nut and bolts of the difficulty when it comes to people that are, say, crossing our border. And in the case of the United States right now, maybe you're in another country and this is occurring. We got to be careful, because there are some that are just fleeing for opportunity. There are those that are fleeing for political oppression. And in the case of political oppression, those people are seeking asylum, and they have a right to asylum in our land due to this kind of a passage. But if somebody is just simply seeking a better opportunity, then they have to apply through a different process. And there should be an opportunity to do that. Because again, we all came from somewhere, right? We weren't here first. And even the people who would go, well, the first peoples. Well, guess what? We're finding out more and more that even the first peoples weren't the first peoples. And there were peoples before them, and it looks like even before them. So everyone came from somewhere. And we have to be gracious as much as possible to those fleeing from the oppression of another country. For 6 years you shall sow your land and gather its yield, but the 7th year you shall let it rest and lie fallow, that the poor of your people may eat, and what they leave the beasts of the field may eat. You shall do likewise with your vineyard and with your olive orchard. 6 days you shall do your work, but on the 7th day you shall rest, that your ox and your donkey may have rest, that the son of your servant woman and the alien may be refreshed. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Look, everybody needs a break. It feels like we need to work 7 days a week sometimes. But if you're just pounding it, if you're like in a startup mode, or you work for some software company, or maybe you're just grinding away like I do, driving Lyft or something, you got to stop. You got to trust God. If you trust God with a day of rest, God will bless you. And make that day of rest. It doesn't have to be all day reading your Bible, okay? It doesn't have to be spent 100% in church or whatever. The point is God gave us the Sabbath. He told us that it's okay. You can rest. Take a break. God took 6 days to make everything, and then he rested. And And yeah, there are going to be periods where you grind and you work really hard. And this doesn't apply if you're like, look, if you're imprisoned and they make you work 7 days a week or whatever. Like, of course there are exceptions. But the point is, don't miss the main point. The main point is, don't work yourself to death. Take a break, honor the Lord on that day, and rest. Okay? Pay attention to all that I have said to you, and make no mention of the names of other gods, nor let it be heard on your lips. 3 times in the year you shall keep a feast to me. Okay, here are 3 big feasts, right? So, 1, you shall keep the feast of unleavened bread, as I commanded you. You shall eat unleavened bread for 7 days at the appointed time in the month of Abib. For in it you came out of Egypt. None shall appear before me empty-handed. You shall keep 2, the second one, the feast of harvest, of the first fruits of your labor, of what you sow in the field. You shall keep the feast of ingathering at the end of the year. 3rd, right? Ingathering. When you gather in from the field, the fruit of your labor, 3 times in the year you shall appear all your males before the Lord God. Okay, so unleavened bread. Second one is the first fruits, and then you have the ingathering at the end of the year. 3 different feasts. You shall not offer the blood of my sacrifice with anything leavened, or let the fat of my feast remain until morning. Okay, basically no mold or bacteria. But I mean, that would be the health side of this code. But the Lord also has purposes in these things. The best of the first fruits of your ground you shall bring into the house of the Lord your God. You shall not boil a young goat in its mother's milk. Now, as I understand it, and if you're Jewish by heritage, and you can correct me, but as I've studied this, you shall not boil a young goat in its mother's milk. Of course, that's horrific concept, right? The life-giving substance from a mother being used to literally cook its child. It's a horrific image, right? And that's where we get the concept of kosher, as I understand it, right? That's why you don't mix, there's no mixing of meats and cheeses, right? Like at the grocery store even, they used to. They don't do it anymore because you bag your own groceries. But every now and then you'll find a checkout counter, a person who's been doing it for a long time, and they will not bag meat with your dairy. You shall not boil a young goat in its mother's milk. So this is where you get to the extremities of, well, okay, don't do that. But then just in case it'll ever be implied that we did that, let's never put meat and dairy together, right? And so now I could be totally wrong, but as I've studied it, that's where the kosher laws come from. It comes from this concept. And some of these other writings here around, how you deal with meat and unleavened bread, you don't bring it when you're doing sacrifice, all that. Behold, I send an angel before you to guard you on the way and to bring you to the place that I have prepared. Pay careful attention to him and obey his voice. Do not rebel against him, for he will not pardon your transgression, for my name is in him. Okay? So, this is a little bit interesting. It does say that we have entertained angels and didn't know it. James does. I believe that's James. Now I'm second guessing myself. Okay. In the New Testament, it says that we have, in fact, entertained angels. I feel dumb now. I know my Bible really well, and now I'm second guessing myself. Okay. But we have. And angels aren't always showing up in big, bright white robes with fire and lightning in their eyes. That's not how they show up all the time. In fact, the concept is that they show up and they embody the person of a person. They come in the form of a human being, but they have a unique mission, and often the way that they talk is in such a way to discern or ask something, to see what you'll say, or to give you an opportunity to give God glory in a situation. What purpose this serves in heaven? Well, the angels rejoice when, somebody comes to salvation. There is the moments of a fallen creature like us that has come to salvation when we take these moments to honor God or do something that acts out in a way God wants, and they are present, that has a ripple effect into eternity, into heaven. And they are messengers, and oftentimes it could be that they are aligning us or realigning us with a mission or a purpose in our life. That, again, it might just be a little subtle tweak or a little subtle help, but them being angels, messengers of the Lord, they have that purpose. Again, you listen. Behold, I send an angel before you to guard you on the way to bring you to the place that I have prepared. Pay careful attention to him and obey his voice. Do not rebel against him, for he will not pardon your transgression, for my name is in him. And many people believe that it's also a reference as God is working out his mission in the people of Israel coming out of Egypt into the promised land, that this angel is in fact pre-incarnate Jesus Christ. But if you carefully obey his voice and do all that I say, then I will be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary to your adversaries. When my angel goes before you and brings you to the Amorites and the Hittites and Perizzites and Canaanites and Hivites and Jebusites, and I blot them out, you shall not bow down to their gods, nor serve them, nor do as they do, but you shall utterly overthrow them and break their pillars in pieces. You shall serve the Lord your God, and he will bless your bread and your water, and I will take away your sickness from among you. None shall miscarry or be barren in your land. I will fulfill the number of your days. I will send my terror before you, and I will I will throw into confusion all the people against whom you shall come. I will make all your enemies turn their backs to you. And I will send hornets before you, which shall drive out the Hivites, Canaanites, Hittites from before you. I will not drive them out from before you in 1 year, lest the land become desolate, and the wild beasts multiply against you. Little by little I will drive them out before you, until you have increased and possessed the land. And I will set your border from the Red Sea to the Sea of the Philistines, and from the wilderness to the Euphrates. For I will give the inhabitants of the land into your hand, and you shall drive them out before you. You shall make no covenant with them and their gods. They shall not dwell in your land, lest they make you sin against me. For if you serve their gods, it will surely be a snare to you. When you're moving into this land, don't rebel against my angel. Follow my angel. And I'm going to go before you. I'm going to eat away at encroach upon their area. The fear of you is going to go before you. I'm actually going to send some hornets. All kinds of stuff is going to happen. People are going to freak out. They're going to back up. And I'm not going to do this all in a flash in like 1 year, because if I just send them all out in that time frame, you're going to be able to inhabit all this land. And guess what? Wild beasts are going to kind of come in, and you ain't going to be able to make a life there. And you're all like, what? Wild beasts? Well, when wild beasts are plentiful and you don't got guns, humans, albeit that they have a lot of ability to create strategies, right, for dealing with wild beasts, we're talking about a world where wild beasts were very, very plentiful, very powerful. And it took a large population to keep them at bay. And I'll close on this. I recently was watching a clip. In fact, it was a Joe Rogan clip, and he was on somebody else's podcast. And he was talking about a time when him and a buddy were out, and his buddy was watching through a scope, like a long distance scope. And he saw a grizzly bear literally take a paw chasing a moose, a full grown moose, and with one swipe, break the back of a moose. Wild animals are terrifying. I think we have Disney-fied, we have anthropomorphized our animals on TV for so many years. We forget how incredibly violent and vicious they can be. We have told ourselves that they don't want to eat us or attack us because, they're misunderstood. No, we just aren't their ideal food. But given an opportunity, should we create a conflict with them or find ourselves without any protections, wild animals have no problem challenging us. So God did not move all those peoples out or promise to do that in just some flash in a year, because he was like, I care about you, and if I do this just all really fast and just make them all go away, all these Hittites, Perizzites, Canaanites, and whatnot, if I just push the Amorites out, guess who's going to move in before you can kind of fill out the land? So even there, the Lord is gracious. He is compassionate. All right, well, this was a heavy episode. We went through a lot of stuff. Talked about slavery. We talked about sorcery. We talked about when it's okay to defend yourself, when it's not, when you have to pay restitution for an error in judgment or something your animal did, or when you don't, how you got to take care of people in the case of marriage and not marriage. We talked about the actual conquering, talked about a few of the feasts, right? There's a lot here. And can you see, and I tried to take time in explaining how, at least I understand and have studied, how even in our American law, and perhaps if you're in another country, your laws, you can see how they derive from these divine laws that were given to the people of Israel. And no, we don't keep these laws. These laws are not for us. These laws were for the people of Israel coming out of Egypt, establishing their country in the land of the Canaanites. And this was done like 1400 years before Jesus came around. So these laws are not our laws. And so when we try to take those laws and just blanket put them on top of our society, it's not fair to those who live here, because not everybody abides in them. And also they aren't our laws, but there are principles of truth in them. Okay. There are really valid principles of truth, and I hope you can see that. All right. Hey, till next time, day 359. Keep walking. God bless you. Bye-bye.